Welcome everyone to our May meeting. Thank you all for coming out. We'll get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you all understand. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. A few things to attend to before we get to our speaker this evening. A few announcements for those of you watching at home too. First off, thank you to everyone who participated on Saturday at our Memorial Day service. Went off without a hitch. It was fantastic showing. We had, I don't know what the final count was, but somewhere between 30 to 40 people. So it was a great showing. A special thank you to 45. Thank you, Bob. Someone counts, not me. Special thank you to Bob Lytle and Peter Rio, who were on the Memorial Day Committee board, and they did all the tough work. Every year they get the mayor, and they make sure that the cemetery is looking nice, and that the grass is mowed, and that all of our speakers and our performers who participate in the weekend happen. So thank you to Bob and Peter. It really would not happen without the two of them. I just have to show up and figure out what I'm going to say and try not to look stupid in the midst of all of it. But especially thank you to them and to everybody who showed up to the Memorial Day service. Speaking of Peter Rio, we have awarded 3 book awards actually this year to local high school students. So I'm going to have Peter come up and talk a little bit about who those award winners were and what that process was like.
Thank you, Mark. I just wanted to give everyone kind of a quick update in respect to the book awards for this year. Jack Richard and myself, we worked together and taking a look at the applications and making a recommendation and a final determination in terms of who the award winners should be. This year we had a very strong field of candidates. Normally we have between 25 and 30 applications from about 8 area regional high schools. This year we had 24 to 25 applications, and the percentage of those that were really high caliber was greater than in the past. We could have awarded any one of the top 10 the book awards for this year. But we chose to provide 3 book awards because everything was so close. A first place of $500 for the first place winner, and second and third place $250 apiece. And the award winner for this year from Bishop Stanley High School is Logan Reese. He receives the $500 amount, and the second place winner was Diana Souza from Greater Liverpool Regional Vocational High School, and third place was Lillian Supernat, also from Bishop Stanley High School. Now, Logan will be attending Boston University to major in neuroscience, and Diana will be attending Bridgewater to major in criminal justice, and Lillian will attend Boston College to major in political science. We've invited all 3 of them, as well as their families, to attend our summer picnic coming up on June the 25th. So these kids are just outstanding candidates. It's a combination of high academic performance during the course of their 4 years, and their performance in terms of community activities and school activities. How they assemble this array of talent and ability is terrific. They have high grade point averages, all 3 of them. They have a high class ranking, top 10, all 3 of them. Honor Society, in some cases president of the Honor Society, captain of the debate team, president of the City Student Council, and being involved in athletic teams such as lacrosse and soccer. That's a combination of skills and ability, plus grade point averages that are in excess of 4.5. That's just remarkable kids. So congratulations to them once again. And that's what I wanted to say, to give kind of an update. So Jack and I enjoy it. We ranked the candidates 1, 2, and 3 this year, and once again this year we saw it in the same way, Jack and myself. So it really was essentially a unanimous selection for Logan, Diana, and Lillian. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Peter, and a special thank you to both Jack and Peter, who spend, I don't know how many hours, a lot of hours, looking through all those applications every year. So thank you to them for their dedicated work on that. We have a P.O. box now. Yay! There have been some issues since since Joe Langlois' passing, and kind of the transition from meeting next door to meeting in the Low Tide Yacht Club. Some of the applications were getting sent there. Also, Peter had people knocking on his door at 10 o'clock at night to submit applications right before the deadline. So that wasn't the best in a lot of ways. So we made the decision to go ahead and get a P.O. box. It is at the Mount Pleasant Street Post Office here in New Bedford. And if anybody is interested, it's P.O. Box 50451, New Bedford, Mass. 02745. All membership, applications, all that kind of stuff will now be sent to that P.O. box. Much easier, cleaner way for us to handle everything. It did cost the round table $236. We got the 12th month free because I did a full year versus paying for it by month. I think it is a worthwhile investment for us to have that P.O. box. June picnic is coming up next month, Tuesday, June 25th at 6 p.m. right here at the Low Tide Yacht Club. No reservations needed. A donation is recommended of $12. We'll be having Ricardi's this year, a buffet style. So, frankly, the board in discussing it, the price for the folks that we usually had used in the past was exorbitant, as is a lot of things now with the changing of economics and all that kind of stuff. So we decided that it was best and the most cost-effective way, and honestly, to get some very high-quality food, to go with Ricardi's and to handle it that way. We'll have a book raffle. If folks want to send me their photos of recent Civil War trips, I know a few members have already done so. I know Mr. Copeland did, and a few other peoples have as well. If you want to send in photos from recent Civil War trips, I'll put them all together and put them on a slideshow, and we'll just play them throughout the day so everybody can kind of see all the adventures that people have had over the past year. So feel free to send those to me directly. Thank you to Dawn and Peter tonight, who provided the coffee and the pastries. Last few months, you've been doing boxes of Joe's. 2 boxes of Joe's were running about $50 for one meeting. So that was kind of ridiculous. We decided that we would buy a coffee maker and make it ourselves, which would be a lot more cost effective. So thank you to Dawn for doing all the legwork of getting an appropriate coffee maker at a good price, I'll add to.
And carafes.
And carafes, yes, and carafes. We'll be doing that every month. If folks wouldn't mind, folks volunteering to bring in pastries and or to help with the coffee every month would be a tremendous help. So if you do have time and would like to help out with that, that would be great. Lastly, our treasurer, Marty Flynn, has announced that he is going to retire from that position. Someone has offered to fill in that role, and this is just a reminder that at the June picnic we will elect the new slate of officers. So the board will propose the new slate of officers before the June picnic, and that will be published before, and then we'll all vote on it then. If anybody's interested in becoming the president, please, please, please do not hesitate to let me know. The guy who is the president now, there might be somebody better, a lot better than him. No, nobody? No. Anyways, if you are interested in being on the board or being the president, let me know prior to June 10th, so that way we can propose that slate of officers. That's everything. We had a lot to get through tonight, so thank you for bearing with me on all those announcements.
Mark?
Yes?
One thing, it's $15 for the paper.
Thank you, Jack. $15. Thank you. $15 is the proposed donation.
Well, once or twice.
Yeah, right. $15. Thank you, Jack. Tonight, we are joined once again by Chuck Veit. Chuck is an author of a growing number of books and articles related to the American Civil War. He has brought his extensive collection of books with him. I encourage everyone after the meeting, please do not hesitate to support Chuck and all of his great work that he has back there by purchasing one of his books or multiples of his books. He primarily focuses on almost lost or undiscovered episodes in the American naval and maritime history, and has turned up evidence of a secret rocket torpedo program in 1862, detailed the development of the Alligator, the Navy's first submarine, and told the story of the largest salvage operation in history in the harbor of Sebastopol. His latest book, A Lively Little Battle, analyzes the little-known battle of Fort Butler in Donaldsonville, Louisiana, in the pre-dawn darkness of June 28, 1863. It is based on multiple eyewitness accounts, and in January of this year, the book won a special merit for scholarly research from the independent publishers of New England. So once again, we are very happy to have Chuck as our speaker tonight.
Let's hope I do as well as it sounds. Thank you all for inviting me. The story of the lively little battle in Donaldson takes place during the hot summer of 1863. As June edges into July, of course, the focus of the nation is on Lee's army invading Pennsylvania. This is not what the North expected. And Vicksburg is invested, it's a stalemate. Port Hudson's invested, it's a stalemate. The only motion is in the east, so everyone's watching, unaware that this relatively unknown colonel from Maine will face daunting odds and earn his place in the history books. There's another officer from Maine, oddly enough, who will fight a similar battle against incredible odds 1,000 miles away in tiny little Donaldsonville, which lies about 75 miles up from New Orleans. The road to Donaldsonville begins at Vicksburg. I'm sorry this is sort of fuzzy and light in here. It's the best we could do, and I appreciate that. At that point, Major General Richard Taylor is trying to interdict or cut the supply lines for Grant, who's investing Vicksburg. And he's failed. He's made 2 night attacks on supply columns. The Navy and the Army has bounced in both times. He's lost a lot of men. He decides, okay, let's cut this at the root. We're going to go into southwestern Louisiana. He decides to go down and take out Bashir City, which is a major supply base for the U.S. Army at this point in time, and it was well defended. He actually takes out 1,300 prisoners and several $1 million worth of supplies. His army is very, very flush now. It's the best supply Confederate army in the entire Confederacy. He sends part of his force under his favorite Cajun officer, Thibodeau, and all the way east to boot. They will come within 20 miles of New Orleans. This is as close as they will get, and they shy away because of the gunboats trying to cross the river. He orders Mouton, in the meantime, cut north, take out the pesky little place called Donaldsonville. There's a small fort there. It's the last bastion below Port Hudson. The state of the Union Army is not good at this point in time, and they're totally unsettled, shall we say, by this incursion. They hadn't expected it at all. For instance, most of the Army of the Gulf, 34,000 men, is with General Banks all around Port Hudson. There are only, believe it or not, 400 Massachusetts troops in New Orleans, period. And there are 1,500 parolees there who might forget their oaths if they find it convenient and get organized. Everyone is so antsy. Admiral Farragut has basically put every gun and cannon he can find on supply ships, on every little boat, because he expects an uprising in the city. Speaking of Farragut, he's stretched incredibly thin. He's trying to keep as many ships as possible, either up around Vicksburg or down around New Orleans, because he fears this open revolt. To cover this entire range of 135 miles, he has 3 gunboats. He had 2 the month before. The third one, Princess Royal, has just arrived. And when her skipper, who's a veteran, Melancthon Woolsey, asks for instructions, all he gets is, I have no instructions. Be vigilant. Watch for the enemy. That's about it. There's nothing much you can do, just wait for them to appear. Mouton tasked this Texan Brigadier General Thomas Greene with taking out the small fort at Donaldsonville. He loads in for berries. It's 6 regiments of Texas cavalry, which of course are under strength at this time, and a battery of guns. He's got about 1,700 men that he can go against this fort with. The fort itself is about a football field wide, a little more than that. It's in a crook of the Mississippi where, oddly enough, it flows west to east. So north is up on all these maps. It's joined by Bayou Lafourche, which most times of the year is actually navigable. You can sneak down there and get to the Gulf of New Orleans, as proven by the pirate Jean Lafitte, who used it constantly to get around customs agents at New Orleans. It has it's protected by a levee all around, and there's a pink parapet there on top of the levee. It's also on the land side fronted by a ditch, which should slow down any attackers. There are 2 stockade gates on what it's called a batture. We would call it a beach. But the low land along the river is called a batture. There are cypress logs, like a Fort Apache type thing with a gate in them, both there and in the north, that should keep anyone walking down the batture from getting in. Fort Butler's been manned by the 28th Maine. The 28th Maine is a little bit of a different kind of unit. It's not cohesive in that they all came from the same locale. The 28th Maine was comprised of scraps of men who said, oh, I want to join the 20th, I want to join the 18th, I want to go with the cavalry, the 6th or something. And they said, they've got all the men we need, we're going to throw all you guys in a new regiment. That's the 28th. So these aren't exactly brothers and friends and co-workers fighting together. It's under Colonel Ephraim Woodman, They've only got a few months left to go. They're a 9-month unit, and in July they're going home. Unfortunately for them, on 27th of May, they're all ordered up to Port Hudson, except for one untried Company G. The balance of the garrison are all convalescents. Though you'll see there's a couple hundred guys in there, but this is used as a rear echelon hospital almost, or sick bay. Guys that are down with the malaria, they'll be coming here and a bunch of other small places in southern Louisiana trying to recuperate. Most of them are very, very weak. And this quote really is telling about Port Hudson. Even though there's 34,000 men there, half are down sick most of the time. This is a great quote. It is a climate fit only for snakes. And it can reduce a sturdy Yankee to a shell of a man in like 3 weeks. We're not used to that heat and humidity, especially if you're wearing wool in the summertime. Had General Greene known how fragile the condition was and the fact they're convalescents, it would have been very encouraging to him. The 28th May, they only have about 123 guys there. 40 or 50 in Company G, the rest are all convalescents from every company that's around. So unit cohesion is a tough one. General Emory has told them that I can't reduce the 400 Massachusetts troops in New Orleans, but anyone who can squeeze a trigger, fog a mirror, and stand up in the hospital, you can have them. So they scrape the hospitals and also try to stop every transport going north or south to say, does anyone want to stop and defend the fort? They literally do this to get a number of officers and men. So we had 11 guys from New Hampshire, 35 from Mass in the 52nd, and another 40 from the 53rd. We also have, I only put 10 down here because I based the presence of black soldiers on a log entry from the Princess Royal, which is stationed off Fort Butler. And it says at 5 o'clock in the morning, watch the transport come from New Orleans and offload some black troops. I put in the squad, maybe there's more guys. All told, 219 men against 1,725 Confederates headed their way. And the instruction was that the sickest man was to pull the lanyard of the gun. Everyone else would roll cannonballs to the muzzle and put them in. That's how bad these guys are. To make it worse, Major Bullen, and I will point out, I do not know that this is Major Bullen. There is no known photograph of him. This is a major from Maine of about the right age. So it's a stand-in, but it might well be Major Bullen. Major Bullen seems to be suffering from what we now identify as post-traumatic stress disorder. I did some research on this, and you don't have to have been in combat to suffer from it. Just the threat of guerrillas around you, of bombs or rockets coming in, of occasionally seeing a corpse float down the river. He suffered from all this stuff. And he's sent out squads of men to fix telegraph lines and that. They're never seen again. He's ready. He needs to go home. And someone said afterwards, the mind of the major has evidently been partially deranged for several weeks. So he's very, very jittery. And the men, know this, and they also know, they can do the math and know the odds. And this, the chilling quote here, success found no place in a reasonable conclusion. They don't expect to survive any sort of Confederate attack. They're aware that Greene is sweeping up by La Fourche, and they're next on the list. Emory tries to stiffen their spine, says, make a good fight. Go team. What's worse, speaking of how hot it was, I know at Gettysburg it's 95 degrees. At this point in time down here, it's 115 degrees, the heat index, and they're wearing wool. It is ridiculous. Even the Times-Picayune in New Orleans said, if you could just take off your flesh and sit in your bones. A somewhat more vicious reporter said you'd like to look out over the plaza and watch fat men lard their way across from side to side in the sun and melting. Greene approaches in the night. The Rebs are going to try another night attack, even though two of them failed up around Vicksburg. He comes up to Paincourtville, which is the border part down here, and decides to do a recon. He spends the early morning of the 27th sending out men collecting information about the fort's defenses. It's mostly from a few scouts here and there who evidently can't count or see very well, and a few locals, none of whom lives closer than 2 miles from the fort. Almost everything he gets back is wrong or misinterpreted. So he's got faulty intelligence from the get-go. For instance, at first he says this isn't going to work. It's very, very bad. He believes there are 5 gunboats there. There's one. Okay? So a lot of these Rebel scouts have never seen a gunboat before, evidently. He believes there are 500 Yankees inside. There's half that many, and he doesn't know they're all sick. He believes it's surrounded by an insurmountable ditch. Also not true in the least. The riverside has no ditch whatsoever. So he sends a note to his boss, Bouton, and says, it's not going to work. Can we just, let's just pop up here and there behind the levee and snipe at their boats, which is quite effective and will in the end work. And Bouton agrees. His courier will not arrive till after the battle. There's no explanation for why the courier disappears in the night. He does eventually show up. Later on, Greene gets more intelligence, and he's encouraged by this. There is no ditch. He finds that out on the riverside of the fort, so that's good. There's the way in. charging over that levee will get them inside. They just go up the hill of the levee, fight the Yankees in the parapet, they're down inside the fort, no ditch at all. He also believes the fort is entirely garrisoned by black troops. This changes the nature of the battle. Combat in the Civil War is savage enough, this makes it that much more barbaric. My assumption is that his truce officer who went to talk to the colonel or the major inside evidently saw some of the Louisiana troops on the parapet and reported back it's all black troops. Greene now issues a surrender ultimatum at 4 o'clock and says he will not be answerable for the consequences. The white Yankees sort of laugh at this because what is he talking about? This is how you fight a war. If we want to surrender, we surrender. The black troops inside know damn well what it means. Just a little while before this, up at Port Hudson, there was a battle. They sent in the 1st and 3rd Louisiana. They suffered 75% casualties, all dead. No wounded, no prisoners. Eyewitnesses said that the Confederates, even though they were out of ammunition and bayonets, would basically fight with teeth and fingernails just to kill every black soldier they could, even though they're trying to surrender. So the rebels are infuriated by the presence of black soldiers. They claim they've been forced by the Yankees to descend to barbarism by the presence of black troops. We have been goaded and matted into uncontrollable fury and hatred. And we would be revolted by this, but you've made us do it. And that we'll be held blameless in the judgment of mankind. They see no problem with slaughtering more black troops. Those 219 men are joined by, again, an estimate here based on a variety of factors, of 20 very, very motivated men. These are former slaves, now freedmen, from a local plantation. When the U.S. came in and took over Confederate territory, they would, of course, free the slaves, offer them paid labor to keep harvesting cotton, raising crops, things like that. One of the local plantations is run by a sergeant from Michigan, a guy named Pollock, and he brings at least 20 men who he's rapidly armed and even more quickly trained, we hope, with weapons, and he brings them into the fort. So we've got about 239 men now inside the fort. Nonetheless, they are stretched incredibly thin. On the northern stockade is the one cohesive company under Thompson from Maine. He's got about 40 men. The other stockade is held by another officer from the 28th Maine with fragments of that regiment in the 16th, a fellow named Neal. Another officer from the 28th, but with all guys from Massachusetts, is holding the parapet on top of the entrance to the one gate. You've got Pollock's freedmen there, about 30 of them. They're on what they consider to be the safest place in the battlefield, the western wall. They don't think the rebels are going to come from that angle. You have reserve squads scattered around. Again, a guessing here, there's references to them. Exactly how many, I'm not sure. And you've got a number of 24-pounder guns that are supposed to cover the fields. Bullen doesn't like the way the odds are shaping up. He goes to Woolsey and says, I'm willing to evacuate the fort. Let's just give it up rather than be slaughtered. Woolsey, of course, is a veteran sailor. He's seen a lot of combat on the eastern seaboard, on the rivers and everything. And he says, basically, we're captured, then we'll surrender. Not before that. He is actually the ranking officer. The way that Army and Navy ranks don't quite line up, but he doesn't really play that hand except here. The rebel plan is not a bad one, but it requires some incredibly precise timing. And for a night attack, it's too complex. The idea is that several of the regiments, and TPR is Texas Provisional Rangers, and TMV or Texas Mounted Volunteers, most of the regiments will feint attacks and hold the Yankees down on top of the parapet. Not so much to inflict many casualties, but to keep them from running to where the real attack's coming from. Two other regiments then, Shannon and Hardeman, will come up the levees along the bayous and the river and breach the fort. Hardeman has a tougher job. He's got to get in the main gate. The other fellows, there's no ditch there. They just have to get up the levee, up the side of the levee into the parapet. Greene does not share this plan until 8:15 with his men. So evidently he got the rest of his information by 4 o'clock, but it took him hours to come up with a plan. Now it's already dark, it's 8:15, and he has no time to inform his subordinates, and they have no time to trickle down what information they have. As night falls, they head for Donaldson about a half hour later, 8:45 p.m. The weather should be a help. It's a low fog, it's almost a full moon, but it's setting by 1:30 in the morning when they plan the attack to go in. As they move into position now, the ace in the hole makes an appearance. An AWOL Navy officer, John Stevenson. Stevenson has a history of doing things without the approval of his COs and their harebrained schemes, but they always work. This guy has landed and captured more people, taken out more signal posts, done more stupid stuff, and come away scot-free. He will, at the end of the war, be advanced 15 levels, not ranks, but levels in the hierarchy of the Navy pay scale and seniority. So he's going to bump up 30. So he doesn't usually ask permission. He just does things. He's done it this time. He actually gets off the Princess Royal and gets dressed as a civilian, goes into the fort, and then runs out of the fort towards the rebel pickets. He assumes they're a mile or so away. Now the Yankees in the fort don't know who this is. He's dressed as a civilian. Maybe he has information. They start shooting at him. In an earlier escapade similar to this along the Rappahannock, he told his fellow sailors, I'm going to pull this same sort of stunt, shoot wide. These soldiers aren't trying to shoot wide. They're just bad shots. So he gets away and is taken in by the rebels and convinces them that he's from New Orleans, tells them all about the ship because he knows they already know all the information about how many men, how many guns, so they take him into their confidence. And he learns their plan. He learns everything about it he possibly can. I do not know how. That's a bit of a blank page where he exactly was or how he got the plan in time. Right at midnight, the rebels finally get towards Donaldsonville and they start the attack. Shannon is, unfortunately for him, immediately spotted. The pickets that are falling back from this little suburb called Port Barrow spot him and light up the town. This stalls the rebel advance. They don't dare pass beyond that because then they'll be backlit. So they have to wait for the fires to go down. Princess Royal, in the meantime, knows something's up and she starts prowling looking for targets along the Butler. They know the way the rebels are coming. And 2 regiments just disappear. Lane, who's an old Texas Ranger, for inexplicable reasons, spends the whole night in camp. He never noticed the other 1,500 guys trotting past. He just sits there. Hardiman believes he fell prey to a very daring and brave, if not foolish, local who misguided him. All he had to do was follow Bayou Lafourche. River on this side, levee on that side. That's what he's supposed to do. He doesn't get there at jump-off time. Stone jumps the gun. He hears the picket firing. He opens up, tries to pin down Neal at the lower stockade. Shannon is flummoxed by the levee. You notice this red line up here in the inset? I looked at levee maps from right after the war. And there actually is a little cul-de-sac in there. And the fact that Shannon got stuck in there is he actually says, the ground caused much blundering. I believe he took his men, some 400 troopers, into the cul-de-sac, thinking that on the right was the main levee, and if I follow that, I'll get to the fort. So he's got his whole regiment stuck in this dead end. He's got to turn them around, back them out, turn them around again, marching towards the levee, and go down the levee towards the real fort. They thought they were actually going to attack the fort at that point in time. And of course, for some reason, the Texans, who are gung-ho about this, won't shut up. This is not a silent night attack. Woolsey records all we had to do was shoot where they were yelling. The yelling is a little different than normal. I have several eyewitness reports that says among the veterans they knew what a rebel yell sounded like. This was more animal or guttural and vicious. My theory is they were trying to scare the bejesus out of what they thought was an all-black garrison. Terrify them beforehand, make them surrender, make them flee, make them make mistakes. It's not the rebel yell, it's just like a horde of animals coming towards the fort. The northern Yankees are not impressed by the way. Finally, the fires in Port Barrow begin to die down and the other regiments can jump off. Shannon makes his assault, assuming that Hardiman down here is making his, but he's nowhere to be found. He's got to breach that levee up there. He has 15 axemen, so they're specially trained to do this. Both Hardiman and Shannon have a group of axemen. They try to pin the Yankees down, cut through the stockade and the gate itself. They finally get through that and go around the batture at the end of the gate. And so now they're on the Yankee side. They push them back up the parapet. Bullen sees this and sends Neal's 10 men away from that gate, which is not under attack, heads them up there very quickly so that they can help repel them. Unfortunately, Shannon is wounded in the first assault. He goes down. His second in command, Ragsdale, has no idea of the plan. The colonel never told his officers what it was they were supposed to do. After the fact, a lot of the surviving rebels said, we thought once we were through the stockade, we were in the fort. A lot of them got prepared to hunker down. We've done our job. No, you have to assault this levee. They have no idea of it. His men are confused. They don't know what to do. Phillips, at least down here with the 3rd Texas, realizes, okay, Lane's not there. We've got to shift to cover Shannon. He shifts and leaves this whole area wide open. Woolsey fires blindly along the side of the batture. He doesn't want to hit anybody in the fort, but what they've done ahead of time, again, they know the rebel plan. They've lit signal fires on either end of the fort. If Woolsey fires between them, he's going to hit Yankees. He fires outside of them, he's going to hit guys in gray. And this is what he does. He begins a long evening of peppering the 5th Texas with grape shot and round shot. Again, Ragsdale then is killed in the second assault. Now you're down to lieutenants and sergeants trying to run this regiment. They're terribly confused. They don't know what to do. The second assault is also rebuffed by the Navy guns and Thompson's Mainers on top. Finally, they fall back to Butler, where it drops off. They figure they can shelter behind the embankment. Not so much. Woolsey is there waiting for them. And Woolsey is in very, very close, because he not only opens up with great guns, he arms his men with rifle and pistol. They're that close to the rebels. They can shoot at them with small arms. The return fire is so bad, he actually tells his men, you work the guns laying down, which is possible. I've done it in a reenactment. It's tough to do, but it's safer. Herbert finally realizes down here in the southern part of the fort that Hardeman is a no-show. And he knows this is a two-pronged attack. It's important to pin the Yankees down. He decides, all right, we're going through that narrow gateway. We're going to attack the wall, the stockade. He suffers Johnson's fire and Neal's fire and makes it there. Bullen, seeing this, realizes, okay, we've repulsed the rebels at the northern stockade. Let's send 10 more men down south. Guys are running back and forth all night long, firing at rebels. This is an ad hoc attack. He doesn't have the axes. His men don't have the training. They're supposed to advance to the edge of this ditch, fire at the Yankees on top, and that's the whole plan. They weren't told they're going to have to breach this. They have no tools at all. They slam up against the stockade and try to fire through the loopholes that the Yankees are using to fire at them. Neal goes along. He has men standing on boxes and stuff like that. He says, I spent the night going along, hitting the butts of the men's guns up so they fired down instead of just shooting over the stockade. The rebels can't return the fire at all. Finally, the 5th Texas makes a third and final attempt by extending the line. They make a little progress this way. A number of Yankee officers are killed at this point. But again, Neal says, I can hold this. I can't get through. Bullen sends 10 more men back up there, and they repulse these guys in hand-to-hand combat. They are, in effect, over the levee and in the fort. They just don't realize at that point in time. They're repulsed, and they decide to get out of Dodge. Woolsey keeps on firing and ushers them on their way back up the Butler. A number of the men make a choice. Do I run up the Butler where the Navy guns can still get me? Hopefully they're being quiet now. A number of other ones hop the levee to get away from the Navy guns and fall in with Phillips. This is important for the way the battle is misinterpreted, because they're bringing a report that they were repulsed on that side of the fort. Phillips has no idea there's no ditch there. The idea there's a ditch is what sticks in everyone's minds. So they join Phillips. Finally, the second gunboat from the north arrives. She's like 50 miles away, but the rebels have not cut the telegraph lines. So word reaches her when the battle first begins, and she pours on the coal and comes south. Phillips is still trying to pin guys down. Hardeman is a no-show. Herbert is stuck. Shannon is fragmented. Hardeman finally arrives. It's about 3:30 in the morning. It's not long until sunrise. He arrives with his axemen and everything, but they can't get through the press of rebel bodies from Herbert's regiment. They're stacked up against the stockade. They're not wounding or hitting many Yankees, but they're falling like flies. They can't reach it. They can't reach the stockade. Now Winona knows to fire down the Bayou Lafourche, and just rips into the rebel regiments that are just massed in there. They can't fight back. They decide to break and run back down to Butler, back out into the fields. Colonel Major's in charge of some of the regiments. He's under Green, and he realizes this isn't going the way it's supposed to. It's got to be a two-pronged attack. He assumes that Hardeman is fighting his way in the southern corner of the fort, not knowing he's already cut and run. He's got to have somebody attack the other side of the fort. He turns to Phillips with his 3rd Texas and says, into the ditch and up the wall. And he protests, but he obeys. Now, this is a smaller fort that gives you an idea of the way that Fort Butler was constructed, with a ditch, a slope, and you're on the top. This is the greatest misconception of the battle. The ditch is not at all surmountable. Green and his men believe from reports, they were told the ditch is 12 feet wide, 16 wide, 12 deep. He actually says, I can't get enough ladders or long planks to get over that. So his plan doesn't mean going into the ditch. He figures they'll be trapped. This is what Phillips expects in a square-off ditch. You can't see too well there. I blew it up. My big breakthrough with this book was finding the actual plans of the fort, which, as far as I know, no one's found before. They were in the National Archives, hidden in a quartermaster's archive instead of engineering. But the plans for the fort show that this is how wide it is. It is a 16-foot wide ditch, but with 45-degree slopes, which are easily surmountable because they're lined with brick. All they have to do is pull out bricks and use it for hand and footholds. They're only in danger at the very top when they get up there, because this is line of sight for the Yankees. The safest place in the battlefield was in the ditch. the one place they don't want to go, no one can shoot them there, not the gunboat, not the Yankees. The rebels soon realize this, and they just as soon stay put. What they don't know is that the spot they're about to assault, ironically, is filled with black soldiers and black freedmen who have a real axe to grind. These are going to be the most vicious fighters of the entire evening on the Yankee side. The rebels, of course, are quite relieved to be in a nice, safe ditch and realize nobody's getting shot, and they're happy to stay there. He's very reluctant to go up the slope, but they decide, let's stay down here and throw bricks at him. Which they do till they realize that when they come back down the slope, a kepi doesn't stop a brick at all. So a number of guys have head wounds from the bricks. They decide, let's stop throwing bricks up there. It's a bad idea. He leads them up, Philip leads them up, and he's felled by one of Pollock's freedmen. We know this for a fact because I don't know if it's a freedman or a Louisiana soldier that shot him. Pollock is right next to him, and Pollock grabs the officer's sword. It's a sword he recognizes from a fellow officer who Phillips took it from him in southern Louisiana a week before. So it's quite distinct. So we know for a fact that one of the black soldiers or freedmen kills Phillips for property. The rebels decide to hunker down in the trench again. They don't want to go up if they can. They decide to play dirty pool and try a flag of truce twice. One guy raises the flag of truce. When the Yankees show up, everyone else shoots at him. No Yankees are killed, but the third time they try it, the truce flag bearer is shot down. And one of the guys from Maine said, this is against the rules of warfare, but you're not going to burn us 3 times. We're going to fight that way, we'll fight that way. Ridley, his second in command, makes a second attempt. He gets up there with a few men, but he's wounded and captured. He'll spend the rest of the war in prison. The Texans decide to hunker down in the ditch. It's safer here than anywhere else. We're not moving. And finally, when dawn comes, they realize we can't go anywhere. They're just going to knock us down and go across the open fields of Port Barrow. And the battle ends there. This is a totally unexpected defeat. One of the big boons to this research, aside from finding the map, was Captain Edward Neal came from Wiscasset, Maine. And we actually found a tour book from Maine that referenced a letter he supposedly wrote. We spent 4 hours with him, my wife and I, and finally we were about ready to give up. We looked in a file that was dedicated to his sister instead of him, so a different last name. His sister Charlotte saved a 9-page letter he wrote the day after the battle. Beautiful eyewitness stuff. A lot of the detail in here is because of good old Captain Neal. But he writes in there that the rebels thought this was going to be such a slam dunk, such an easy fight. They just walk in, no big deal. We're weak, we're sick, we're just going to surrender. Didn't work that way. The Confederates admitted this was a terrible, terrible loss, and there was no point to it at all. They should have done what Greene first suggested, which is leave the fort alone, they'll die on the vine. Let's cut slits in the levee, which they were aces at, pop up fire chips, disappear behind the levee before they can fire back. They would do this in the weeks ahead very effectively. The casualties tell the story. The rebels lost about 500 men, almost 30% of their force. And those numbers are probably low. Local slaves or freedmen reported that there were hundreds of Confederate wounded. Some of the men who should have been prisoners were spirited away again by another flag of truce officer who basically walked up to the fort, and when he's under flag of truce, he's like doing this to all his men who are hunkered down hiding. He said, get under the flag of truce, they don't be captured, and they do. On the northern side, 10 dead, 15 wounded. This is an incredibly miraculous victory. And as they're gathering the dead, Mouton's courier arrives and says, don't make the attack. Sorry for the fuzziness, that's everyone. Again, a great many prisoners, 124, mostly the guys along the river, the 5th Texas. An awful lot of officers. Brought inside the fort, the Confederate prisoners were wicked upset. It's just the Yankee victory to use that word. They didn't realize how sick the garrison was, or how few they were. At one point, Neal, I think, is guarding prisoners and realizes there are more prisoners than I have men. Thompson sees this and sends over 10 more guys, and some of them don't even have loaded muskets. It's just like, hold them with the bayonet, don't. Some of them ask, where's the rest of your men? They're off getting water. They're hidden for the next attack. They're in the mess hall. There's so few left, it's ridiculous. Some of the prisoners are sent on board the gunboats because they're worried about so many being inside the fort, and some of them recognize Stevenson, and you can't read it out here, but it says that their language to me was unparliamentary because they recognize him as the spy. They take him into their confidence. Immediately a second battle begins, and it is waged to this day, the blame game. Mouton blames his courier. Okay, all well and good. Greene blames his guides for the absence of rain and the late arrival of Hardeman, probably true. He also faults local intelligence. He actually believes there is a ditch along the riverside of the fort. And my theory is that the men who were repulsed there joined with Phillips's men who did face a ditch. So when word finally got back to higher command, so you're down to sergeants and corporals and a few lieutenants by the time these guys pull back, the stories get confused. We were repulsed on that side. Oh yeah, the damn ditch stopped us. And the stories become one. As you'll see, a lot of people believe that. Taylor, who's a wealthy Louisianan and will not blame a fellow Louisianan like Tom, he says, well, Greene should have disobeyed the order. He should have known to do that. That typically gets you shot, as I understand it, but that was what he counseled. He perpetuates the myth of the ditch along the Mississippi. How else to explain the loss? He also adamantly believes the day he dies, the fort was entirely garrisoned by black troops. And the worst part is, he puts this in his book, Reconstruction, and to this day, people reference that book as God sends. I know a woman down there who runs the River Road African Museum. She's African American, and years ago they put up a monument to the black soldiers, and it says Fort Butler, built by black hands, all true, defended by black soldiers. I sent her a copy of the book, and I said, I got to tell you, it's not all black soldiers. They're there, but it's a very cooperative effort. She was polite, but she had believed Taylor's research, or his belief that it was all black. On the other side, there's a lot of misplaced credit. Bullen, remember I said, was jumpy with PTSD. Well, now it's even worse having through this attack. When they finally get replacements coming in, veteran troops, he confronts one soldier who busts him about, oh, you guys, you're 9 months and you go home now, the real soldiers are here. And Bullen asks him what he said. What was a smug remark? Who are you? He said, I'm a soldier. And Bullen, who's been carrying his pistol under his armpit like this, draws on him. We don't know if he was just going to point or point and shoot. The other guy has his musket inside, ready and loaded. He is much faster, and he drills Bullen. So Bullen dies a couple days after the battle. We only have his preliminary report that went to the state of Maine, not his official Army report. So he's killed before he can do anything. Emory's official report makes only a brief mention. This is typical Army lingo, supporting Regiment XYZ. It happens all the time throughout the entire Civil War. As far as the Army's concerned, that might have been a gunboat there. I didn't see it, but they say it was there. Farragut reacts to this. His officers who were there are offended by the fact that it seems they did nothing at all to help defend the fort. Emory agrees, but he doesn't change the official report. So if you read the Army history of the War of Rebellion, it's like the Navy was never there at all. The 28th Maine pulled it off. The Navy's role, it's still mooted to this day, even in modern publications. The state of Maine, I wish you could read this, the state of Maine, based on Thompson's 1896 report, it credits several regiments of Maine supermen. They always use that word for defending the fort. They never mention the freedmen, the fellows from Louisiana, Massachusetts, or New Hampshire, and never mention the Navy. It's Maine supermen. Newspapermen tell a totally different story. When you go back and read the period reports, the official word goes out too fast for these guys to do their digging, and it gets up to Washington and the Northern papers, and it's Emory's report. When the newspapermen on the next boat start sending back reports, it's the gunboats that get all the credit. It's entirely due to the Navy. They would have been taken, they would have been gobbled. And the most telling thing here is every success in this theater has been the result of Navy efforts, not Army efforts. Most telling, this reference to the whole war, this fellow's a senator on the First World War I, and he says it wasn't your Army that whipped us in the South, it was your Navy. I do Navy research, just a little bit biased, okay? The conclusion though, how could this have failed? Still, with all these factors, how could it possibly have failed? Faulty intelligence is the big thing. Hubris and overconfidence. These guys were fresh from a victory at Fort Brashear, and they'd just taken out hundreds and hundreds of the Yankees, 1,300 of them, filthy with supplies. It's a sickly garrison. This should be a cakewalk. Like Neil said, they expected to walk in without any contest. Failure to communicate the plan is the biggest thing. I don't know what Greene was up to all those hours, but didn't involve any of his subordinates. So what little they knew couldn't even be communicated to their subordinates. So they're going in totally blind. But still, it's 1,725 men to 229. That should still be a slam dunk. Well, a lot of credit goes to John Stevenson. Having the entire enemy game plan is a big plus. Also, all the soldiers from these 4 different states who fought together side by side to repulse the enemy. The guys from Maine aren't Supermen, but they fought like that. And of course, the freedmen, who just tasted freedom, were newly armed, but still fought like tigers and took out one of the officers on the other side. And that is the story of Fort Butler. Do we have any questions? Before we do go to questions, there's one thing I wanted to make you folks aware of. I sent a note to Bob Little, who's kind enough to pass it around. I'm currently involved in trying to find the Civil War's first submarine. This is one that was a predecessor to Alligator, which the Navy looked for right after the turn of the millennium. We believe we know exactly where it is. You can go online and read the story. That says NavyMarine.org. Go there. If you're moved to donate, we'll take anything. 10s, 20s, 50-cent pieces, whatever. Because we have a long way to go. But we think we know exactly where the sub is. We just need magnetometer readings to prove it's down there to get the professionals interested. This would be a first. This is like square one Navy submarine archaeology, and it's not 6,000 feet on the bottom. All right, any questions, Ed? There'll be a test.
Have you been there? Did you go to that fort? No, that's
no.
Back to the other one.
That one. Yes, I have. There's very little left. Very little of it. You've got, I think even the archaeologist is limited to like this part of the levee, and they're starting to find a little bit of where the buildings were. I'm amazed that he never found the plan that I did. I sent it to him as soon as I found it. But so much of it is gone now. I think back in the 30s or 40s, the Army Corps of Engineers decided that they would not allow the Mississippi to reroute itself like going to Bayou Lafourche. So they basically paved over that and put in giant drain pipes. So that it's now sort of swampy marsh most of the time. It's no longer navigable. And in doing that, they obliterated part of the fort. And you can see this is the bayou right down here. They obliterated a big chunk of the fort. The northern part, Port Barrow, has expanded to its own city now, so it's all streets and everything.
So is it state-run? Is it under the auspices?
It's more of a local park.
It's
It's more of a local park, a town park.
It's local park.
Yeah.
Is it staffed? Do they?
No, I don't think there's an interpreter there at all. And unfortunately, their historical society has faded away and it's not there anymore. They had a good map of the valley and everything. I visited down there, but I think it's mostly uncommon. You know, I climbed levees and stuff like that, trying to get good photographs.
What time of the year did you go down?
I went down in the summertime. It was.
Did you wear wool?
No, I didn't wear wool. No, polo shirt was hot enough. And I could do it. One point, my wife had said, "Yeah, one of the places we hadn't been is like Mississippi. Let's go this summer." You go alone. I don't do humidity like that. The disconcerting thing was to walk through New Orleans and you'd see all these traffic signs, 35 miles, no parking. And there's one up here that says, level if the levee breaks. Sea level if the levee breaks. Like that. All right, well, thank you all very much. Appreciate you coming out tonight.